Forget everything you've ever seen in the movies. Silence, followed by a low, never-before-heard underwater roaring sound. The deadliest predator that ever lived, wasn't a shark. And it doesn't even come close to being the most bizarre. Prehistoric. Reality hides biological nightmares that would make any Hollywood screenwriter feel unimaginative. And today, we're going to show you the 3 worst ones. Our journey into the abyss of real fear begins in a time so long ago that the Earth itself would be unrecognizable to us. Forget the continents as we know them. Forget the grass, the flowers, the vast forests. We are going back 380 million years to the Devonian period. On dry land, the first plants and primitive insects fought a silent, slow battle for survival. But the real action, the epicenter of innovation and terror, was in the water. Welcome to the age of Pisces. The oceans of that time were the great laboratory of evolution. A cauldron of life where the rules of existence were being written, tested, and rewritten in real time. For millions of years, aquatic life was dominated by passive creatures, filter feeders and creatures crawling along the ocean floor. Predation existed, but it was timid, almost experimental. The big question hanging over the waters was, how does a world of prey become a bloody battlefield? The answer came in the form of one of the greatest and most terrifying biological innovations of all time. The jaw. It sounds simple, doesn't it? But the jaw was a revolution. A stroke of genius, born from the arches that supported the gills, which were modified and strengthened, creating a tool capable of biting, grabbing, and tearing. For the first time in the history of the planet, a creature could actively hunt and destroy another with force and precision. The jaw was not just an adaptation. It was the invention of violence on an epic scale. And like all great inventions, it needed a master. A being who would take it to its most terrifying extreme. From the murky depths of the Devonian, this master emerged. He was not like other fish. He did not have the agility of a primitive shark, nor the stealth of a reef hunter. He was something else, a force of nature, an armored ghost emerging from the darkness. His name echoes to this day like a thunderclap. In the history of paleontology, Dunkleosteus, imagine a creature that defied the very idea of a fish. A creature that was part fortress, part guillotine. Dunkleosteus could grow to be more than 8 meters long, the size of a minibus or a modern-day great white shark. But its most shocking feature was its head. About a third of its body was covered in an impenetrable armor of bony plates, a biological helmet that made it nearly invulnerable to any attack. It was a living war tank, patrolling the seas with grim confidence. But if you looked into its mouth, your blood would run cold. Dunkleosteus had no teeth. What it did have were infinitely more brutal. Its jaws were lined with sharp, bony plates that scraped against each other with every bite, keeping them constantly razor-sharp. It was a natural, self-sharpening guillotine, designed not to pierce, but to crush, cut, and shatter anything that got in its way. It was the apex predator of its time. Primitive sharks, hard-shelled ammonites, even other armored fish. Nothing was safe. It didn't hunt for sport. It hunted to eliminate the competition, to establish absolute dominance. But the true horror of Dunkleosteus wasn't just its appearance, or its weapons. It was in the mechanics of its hunt. Modern science has allowed us to reconstruct its attack, and the result is a nightmare of biological engineering. When prey approached, Dunkleosteus didn't have to chase it for long distances. It waited, and then the unexpected happened. Its jaws would open in about 50 milliseconds. That's such an absurdly short time that it's literally faster than the blink of an eye. This explosive opening created a powerful suction vacuum, a vortex of death that yanked prey out of the water and directly into its maw. There was no time to react. There was no chance of escape. One moment you were swimming freely. The next, you were being sucked into hell. And then the closing. Dunkleosteus's bite exerted a pressure of nearly 8,000 pounds per square inch at the tip of its blades. That's a force comparable to that of a Tyrannosaurus rex, concentrated in a much smaller area. It was enough to shear a shark in half, to crush the toughest shells, and to pierce the armor of its own armored prey. It wasn't a bite. It was an execution. This was the dogma of Devonian evolution. Brute force taken to its purest and most lethal expression. Dunkleosteus was living proof that to reign, one had to be the strongest, the most armored, the most devastating. For millions of years, it was the undisputed king, a private nightmare of an entire ocean. But all rains must come to an end. And the very specialization that made him a king also sealed his fate. He was a perfect product of his environment, a king of a world that was about to disappear. When the end of the Devonian period brought one of the greatest mass extinctions in history, with climate change and plummeting oxygen levels, the armored giant was unable to adapt. His strength became his burden. Dunkleosteus was gone, but its legacy remained. It set the standard, the dogma that a predator's power lay in its bite, in its strength. Evolution, however, is a restless artist. It is not content with a single masterpiece. Brute force had reached its peak, but evolution was about to get weird. Very, very weird. Terror was about to take on new forms, more intelligent, more bizarre, and in some ways, even more disturbing. The age of Dunkleosteus and armored fish ended in cataclysmic silence. The dogma of brute force, of impenetrable armor, was shattered by a changing planet. But life, as ever, is resilient and terrifyingly creative. From the rubble of the Devonian mass extinction, new oceans emerged, and with them, new nightmarish forms. Evolution seemed to have grown tired of the simplicity of direct violence. It was time to experiment. It was time for the bizarre dot. We have now entered the Permian period, the whisper of an era that preceded the dinosaurs themselves. The seas were dominated by a new class of predators, sharks, more agile, more versatile, and in many cases, stranger than their predecessors. It was here, in this new testing ground of nature, that we found one of the most enigmatic and disturbing fossils ever discovered. A fossil that, for more than a century, was an enigma wrapped in stone, a puzzle that defied logic. It is known as Helicoprion. But before it was a creature, it was a mystery. Paleontologists had been finding this peculiar structure all over the world. A perfect spiral of teeth, fossilized as a jagged ammonite. It was a geometric nightmare. The question that haunted generations of scientists was both simple and maddening. Where on an animal's body could a circular saw be? The theories were as bizarre as the fossil itself. Was it a weapon at the end of its tail? A defensive dorsal fin? A bizarre spiral of teeth at the tip of its nose? Nature seemed to have created a monster and forgotten to leave the instruction. Manual. It was only with modern technology, with CT scans that could peer inside the rock, that the truth was revealed. And it was stranger than any theory. The saw was not external. It was inside the mouth, in the lower jaw. Helicoprion was, essentially, a shark with an industrial bandsaw for a chin. This aberration's function was terrifyingly efficient. As new teeth grew, the old ones did not fall out. They were pushed into the center of the spiral, creating a continuous cutting mechanism. It did not bite and tear like a modern shark. It fed on soft-bodied prey like squid and ammonites, and used its serrated grin to slice them with mechanical precision. The horror of the Helicoprion came not from its brute strength, but from its calculated strangeness. It was the logic of nature, twisted into an almost industrial form, a living tool that looked as if it had been designed by a sadistic engineer. But the evolution didn't stop there. Let's jump forward in time, to the end of the age of the dinosaurs, the Cretaceous period. The oceans now teemed with life and danger, and here, a new kind of ruler emerged, a creature that became a pop culture icon, a box office monster. But, as usual, Hollywood, in its quest for spectacle, missed the most chilling detail. The real horror of the Mosasaurus wasn't in its first bite. It was in its second. First, let's understand what it was. Not a dinosaur, but a lizard. A close relative of today's monitor lizards and snakes. It decided to return to the ocean and became a masterpiece of adaptation. Its body was long and hydrodynamic, its tail a powerful paddle that propelled it at incredible speeds. It was a torpedo of scales and fury, and its mouth was filled with sharp conical teeth, perfect for grabbing slippery prey. So far, so good. A large, efficient marine predator. But the secret, the anomaly that elevated it to a new level of terror, was hidden deep in its mouth. The Mosasaurus had a second set of teeth, a row of sharp curved fangs that grew not from its jaw, but from the roof of its mouth. These are pterygoid teeth. A toothed throat. Its function was an example of the purest and cruelest architecture. Of desperation. When the Mosasaurus had its prey in its mouth, a fish, a squid, or even an unlucky dinosaur that had wandered too close to the water, its main teeth held it steady. But then the second jaw would come into play. These inner teeth moved independently, back and forth, like the claws on a conveyor belt. They would dig into the victim, and with a ratcheting motion, pull it inexorably toward the back of its throat. Think about what that means. The prey, still alive, still struggling, didn't stand a chance. The more it struggled, the tighter the pterygoid teeth gripped it and dragged it toward its doom. There was no escape, no retreat. The mosasaur's mouth wasn't just a weapon, it was a processing machine. Death wasn't a moment of pain. It was a slow, inevitable process of being swallowed alive by a throat that refused to let you go. This was the new face of terror in the Cretaceous oceans. It wasn't just the strength of Dunkleosteus or the weirdness of Helicoprion. It was efficiency taken to the level of systemic cruelty. A design that ensured that once captured, the prey's suffering would end only when it reached the predator's stomach. Brute force had been mastered. Weirdness had been honed into a precision. Tool. Evolution had proven that there was more than one way to become a monster. But the grand symphony of prehistoric terror still had its final movement in store. What would happen when evolution decided to combine the intelligence of a mammal with the strength of a titan? What would happen when the apex predator itself became prey? The stage was set for the arrival of the true king, a monster made to hunt monsters themselves. We have left behind the brute strength of armored fish and the freakish efficiency of tooth-throated reptiles. We have now entered the Miocene period, a geologically recent era, barely a blink of an eye in deep time. The oceans were no longer an experiment. They were a consolidated empire, and within this empire, a new dynasty had risen to power, the mammals. The waters of the Miocene teemed with a diversity of whales and dolphins never before seen. Giants were no longer the exception. They were the rule dot in this world of titans. Being an apex predator required a new level of sophistication. Strength alone was not enough. Weirdness did not guarantee the throne. The new ruler would need to combine the best of all worlds: colossal size, devastating weapons, and most importantly, the calculating intelligence of a mammal. The stage was set for evolution to deliver its final masterpiece of terror. Our story takes us to one of the driest places on the planet, the Pisco Desert in Peru. A barren and desolate landscape, but one that holds a secret. Millions of years ago, this desert was the bottom of a rich and vibrant ocean. In 2008, a team of paleontologists were excavating in this marine graveyard when they came across something extraordinary. It wasn't a complete skeleton at first. It was a fragment of a skull, a colossal skull, and embedded in it was evidence of a monster that until then belonged more to the realm of myth than science. They found a tooth, but tooth is a word that doesn't do justice to what they saw. It was a tusk, a pillar of enamel and dentin 12 inches long, longer than a human forearm, thicker than a bottle of wine. It was the key to unlocking a creature so formidable that its name had to be plucked straight from mythology and literature. They named it Leviathan Melville. The name is a statement, a story in itself. Leviathan is after Leviathan, the primordial sea monster described in biblical texts as the embodiment of chaos and invincible power. And Melville is after Herman Melville, the author of Moby Dick, the greatest obsession story ever written about the hunt for a demonic white whale. The name was a promise, and the creature kept it in every detail. Leviathan was, at its core, a sperm whale. But forget the image of the gentle giant diving for squid. Leviathan was the nightmare version. A predatory sperm whale, some 50 feet long and weighing more than 50 tons. Its body was a cathedral of bone and fury, more robust and powerful than that of a modern sperm whale. And its head was a complex biological weapon. It was a battering ram, designed to ram its prey with cataclysmic force. But most of all, it was its teeth. Leviathan's teeth are to date the largest functional teeth of any known animal in Earth's history. Larger than those of a Tyrannosaurus. Larger and far more deadly than those of a megalodon. Unlike modern sperm whales, which only have teeth in their lower jaws, Leviathan had them in both. A full arsenal of ivory daggers, each designed for a single purpose: to inflict maximum damage on gigantic prey. This was what set it apart from everything that had come before. Leviathan did not eat fish or squid. It specialized in hunting other whales. In those Miocene oceans, whales measuring 7 to 10 meters long were plentiful. To Leviathan, they were its herd, and its hunt was a display of terrifying intelligence and power. Picture the scene. Using echolocation, one of nature's most sophisticated sensory tools, Leviathan emitted powerful sounds, mapping the ocean ahead. This was no ambush hunter hoping for luck. This was a strategist, the ghost in the sonar. Once its target was located, it would approach silently, a mountain of muscle moving through the depths. Then, the attack. A burst of speed, using its massive head to ram the victim, raking bones, causing massive trauma. And before the prey could recover, the bite would come. Those 12-inch fangs were not for gripping. They were for ripping, for tearing out huge chunks of flesh and fat, for causing fatal hemorrhaging in seconds. For millions of years, he reigned, and he did not reign alone. In those same waters patrolled the other emperor of prehistory, the Megalodon. This does not imply constant battle, but something even grander. An ocean so rich and dangerous that it could support two godlike monsters at its head, each dominating its own niche of power. The Megalodon was the pinnacle of fish. Evolution. The Leviathan was the lethal pinnacle of marine mammals. And so the symphony of prehistoric terror finds its final note. We begin with the brute strength of Dunkleosteus. We evolve into the freakish efficiency of Mosasaurus. And we end here with revolution. Leviathan was not just strong, not just weird. He was intelligent. He was a thinking monster, a king killer. Of kings, the ultimate predator, born for a world of giants, and who became the greatest of them all. His end, like that of so many others, came with change. The cooling of the oceans and the disappearance of his preferred prey drove this titan to extinction, leaving behind only his colossal teeth as monuments to a time when monsters ruled the world. Hollywood gave us the fear of what might lie beneath our feet in the water. Prehistoric reality shows us that what once existed defies imagination. Armored brute force, horror of bizarre detail, and predators of godlike scale. Now I ask you, which of these three monsters would scare you the most to encounter while diving? The war tank, the double-toothed nightmare, or the whale hunter? Leave your choice in the comments and tell us which prehistoric creature you want to see unveiled in the next video. If you survived this trip, don't forget to subscribe for more. Secrets of Prehistory.